You know when you get those emails, hey, we updated our privacy policy.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Or you're scrolling through endless terms you have to agree to. It just feels like, paperwork.
Right. Box ticking.
But there's actually a really critical reason behind it all. Something, well, fundamental to how companies handle our information now.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Companies hold so much sensitive data today. Personal details, financial stuff, maybe even health records.
Yeah, everything.
And how they manage that, well, it's not just up to them. There's a whole system, really, a set of rules designed to keep that data safe and make sure they're, operating above board.
And that system, those rules, and how companies prove they're following them, that's what we're digging into today. We've got some material here that kind of lays out the basics of security compliance and reporting. It's a kind of thing that, well, helps make sense of the digital world, even if you're not, studying for a certification exam or anything.
Although our source does mention one.
True.
But yeah, our mission here is really to cut through the jargon, pull out the important bits.
Right.
We want you to finish this understanding why these rules are there, what happens if companies ignore them, who the key players are when it comes to your data, and what kind of reports show they're doing their job right.
Sort of like getting the map for how our data is protected online.
That's a good way to put it. The guardrails, maybe.
Okay, let's unpack it then. At its core, what is security compliance reporting? Why do companies even need to bother?
Well, simply put, it's the process where organizations show they're following specific rules.
Okay.
And these aren't just laws passed by governments. They also include, industry standards and even the company's own internal security policies.
Your own rules?
Yeah. And the why is critical. It's a fundamental part of managing risk and building trust, frankly.
So it's kind of like a regular checkup, but for their security.
That's a great analogy, yeah. These reports, they aren't just paperwork to file away. They're really a tool for the company itself.
How so?
They help the people in charge see where their security actually stands, find weak spots, ideally before something bad happens, and it gives them a roadmap for, getting better over time.
Continuous improvement.
Exactly. It forces them to be systematic about security instead of just reacting when there's a fire.
Okay, I see. So it helps them find their own blind spots. Now, the source we have makes a point about internal versus external reporting. That sounds like who's reading the report really matters.
It absolutely does. The audience completely changes the focus. Think about managing your own money.
Okay.
Internal reporting is like keeping your own detailed budget, tracking expenses against your plan. You're looking for where you might be overspending or maybe where you can save. It's all for your own benefit, spotting your own issues.
Got it. So they're checking their own work against their own standards.
Precisely. The focus is inward. They look at policy adherence. Are people actually following the company's security rules? Are the systems configured right?
Makes sense.
They do regular auditing, consistent checks, sometimes automated, sometimes manual, specifically hunting for internal weaknesses or places they're drifting from policy.
Okay.
And incident response evaluation. So after something does go wrong, like a small breach or an alert, they look back. How do we handle it? Could we do better next time? That gets reported internally.
Learning from mistakes, basically.
Right. And risk assessment is huge for internal reports. Identifying the biggest risks to their important data or systems so they know where to focus their efforts first.
Prioritizing.
Exactly. And finally, employee training. They measure if the security training is actually working. Are people getting it? Or do they need more help understanding certain rules? It's all about self-improvement, catching things before they become external problems.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So, switching gears then. External reporting. Who are they showing these reports to, and what's the goal?
Yeah, here the audience is totally different. Regulators, business partners, customers, potential clients.
The outside world.
Right. And the goal is to prove to these outsiders that the company follows the external rules, usually laws and industry standards they're subject to.
Okay, so this is where things like GDPR and HIPAA come in.
Exactly. A huge piece is showing regulatory adherence. They need hard evidence. They're complying with laws like GDPR if they handle data from Europe, HIPAA for U.S. healthcare data, PCI-DSS for credit cards.
The ones you always hear about.
Those are the big ones, yeah. And it's not optional. It's often a legal must-have.
And I guess having someone from the outside check things helps build trust.
Definitely. That's why third-party audits are so common. You get independent experts to come in, kick the tires, and verify that you meet those external standards. It adds a lot of credibility.
Like getting an independent inspection.
Kinda, yeah. They also report externally on data privacy and protection measures. laying out clearly how they secure sensitive data, and, importantly, what their plan is if a breach does happen.
So being upfront about security and having a plan B.
Yes, transparency and accountability are key. External reports mean keeping clear records, what they did for compliance, audit results, how they fixed any issues found.
Proof.
Exactly. And this builds trust with clients and partners, gives them assurance the company takes security seriously. I mean, you wouldn't want to give your data to or partner with a company that seems clueless about protecting it, right?
No way. Totally. Okay, so internal is for them, external is proving it to everyone else. But what happens when they don't follow the rules? Our source talks about the consequences of noncompliance. And some of these sound pretty nasty.
Yeah, noncompliance just means failing to meet the rules, regulations, standards, whatever applies. It could be accidental, maybe they just didn't know, but the consequences, they could still be severe.
Okay, hit me with the scary stuff. What kind of trouble are we talking?
Well, one of the most direct hits is fines, big ones. Our source uses GDPR as a great example because the fines are tiered and potentially massive.
How massive?
Okay, so for what they call less severe violations, maybe administrative stuff like not keeping the right records or being slow to report a breach, companies can face lower tier fines. These go up to 10 million or 2% of their global annual turnover, whichever is higher.
Wait, global turnover, 2% for a big company, that's huge money.
It's definitely not pocket change.
Yeah.
But then for the more serious stuff like violating people's basic data rights or transferring data illegally, they face upper tier fines.
Uh-oh.
These can hit 20 million or 4% of global annual turnover. Again, whichever is higher.
4%, wow.
Yeah. The scale of these fines really shows how seriously regulators are taking data protection now.
That's a massive incentive to get compliance right. But it's not just about the money, right?
Oh, not at all. The fines are just the start. There are sanctions, other legal or regulatory actions that can drag a company through expensive, time-consuming processes.
Okay.
And critically, there's reputational damage. This is often seen as one of the worst, potentially longest-lasting consequences.
Because trust is everything in business.
Precisely. Think about it, one big data breach or a major fine splashed across the news. It can just shatter the trust that customers, partners, investors have built up over years.
Yeah, people remember that stuff.
And that directly leads to lost customers, canceled contracts, trouble attracting new business, rebuilding that trust. It's a really long, hard road.
I definitely think twice about using a service if they just got hammered for a privacy failure.
Exactly my point. And in some industries like finance or healthcare, which are heavily regulated,
Yeah.
noncompliance can lead to loss of license. Losing the legal right to even be in business, that's potentially game over.
Yeah.
And it permanently damages their credibility.
Wow, like being shut down entirely.
Effectively, yeah. And then there are the contractual impacts. Noncompliance can trigger clauses in contracts, lead to messy legal fights, expensive lawsuits, drawn-out regulatory investigations.
The whole world of pain.
Pretty much. Yeah. It all costs money, consumes resources, and damages the reputation even further. These consequences aren't just abstract risks. They hit the bottom line, relationships, even the company's ability to exist.
And bringing it back to us, the listeners, why should you care if some company faces fines or loses trust? Because ultimately, their problems affect you. It impacts whether you can trust them with your info, how reliable their service might be, and, yeah, the actual security of your data. Their failure puts you at risk.
Absolutely. A company cutting corners on compliance is basically gambling with your data, whether they realize it or not.
So, okay, the stakes are clearly high. How do companies try to stay on top of all this? Avoid those nightmare scenarios? Our source mentions compliance monitoring.
Right. Compliance monitoring is the ongoing process. It's about checking and verifying that the organization keeps following all the rules, laws, regulations, standards over time. Reporting is like taking a photo. Monitoring is like watching the video feed.
Okay, so it's continuous. What does that actually look like?
Well, it starts with a real commitment to due diligence and care. That means proactively, carefully, looking at how things are done, identifying weaknesses, making sure everything lines up with the requirements. It's not just a checklist exercise. It has to be built into how they operate. Includes ongoing risk assessments, too.
Constantly looking under the hood, you mean?
Pretty much, yeah. And then there's attestation and acknowledgement. This is more formal. It's where leadership officially recognizes their responsibility for compliance, maybe signs off on reports, publicly states their commitment. It adds accountability.
Like putting their name on the line, we take this seriously.
Exactly. And monitoring, just like reporting, uses both internal and external approaches. So they do their own self-checks, internal audits, but they're also subject to reviews by external auditors, regulators poking around, checks and balances.
They check themselves, and others check them too. Got it.
Right. And automation is playing a bigger and bigger role. Technology can really streamline things, running assessments, tracking huge amounts of compliance data, even automating parts of the reporting.
Makes sense. Computers are good at that stuff.
It improves efficiency massively, reduces human error, and helps spot potential compliance gaps much faster than trying to do it all by hand.
Technology doing the heavy lifting for compliance.
Yes. Now, speaking of monitoring, one place where all this really comes to a head, where the legal duties and ethical stuff collide, is during a data breach.
The scenario everyone dreads. Companies and individuals.
Absolutely. The immediate risk is to the data subject to you. Things like identity theft, fraud.
Yeah.
And the source points out how critical timely notification is in these situations. There are specific rules about it.
What kind of rules? How fast do they have to tell people?
Well, it varies. Under GDPR, for instance, data controllers have a legal duty to report breaches to the authorities, usually within 72 hours of finding out about it. It's a very tight window.
72 hours? Wow.
Yeah. Compare that to IPA for protected health information in the U.S. That requires notification within 60 days.
Whoa, 72 hours versus 60 days? That's a massive difference.
Depends on the data, huh? It really does. It shows just how specific and varied these rules are. But the point is, timely reporting is a key compliance action you have to take, right in the middle of a crisis.
Okay, so we've covered the why of compliance, the what of reporting, internal versus external, the nasty downsides of getting it wrong, and how companies monitor things. Let's maybe shift focus a bit to something really personal for everyone listening: data privacy.
Right, data privacy. Fundamentally, it's your right to control your own personal information. Simple as that.
And why is having that control so important?
Well, it's about your autonomy. Keeping sensitive stuff confidential, being protected from misuse. Think about it, it's your shield against risks, like identity theft, fraud, even just unwanted tracking or surveillance.
So it helps manage those risks we hear about.
Exactly. Making sure your data is handled securely, used only how you've agreed, it puts you more in control of your own digital life.
Now, the source mentions regulations working at different levels. How does that fit together?
Yeah.
Local, national?
Yeah, privacy rules aren't just one global thing. You have local or regional rules, like the CCPA in California, giving specific rights to Californians. These often address unique local concerns.
Tailored to the place.
Then you have national regulations, covering whole countries, defining baseline rights. IPO in the U.S. for health data is a good example.
Okay.
And then there are global regulations, or ones with global reach. GDPR is the big one here. Even though it's European, it affects any company anywhere if they handle data of people in the EU. And you also have global standards like ISO 27701, offering a framework for managing privacy worldwide.
Huh. So my rights could actually depend on where I live and where the company is, and maybe even where they process the data. That sounds complicated for just a regular person to track.
It absolutely can be, which leads nicely to understanding the different roles involved in managing all that data. Our source clarifies the key data roles from a compliance perspective.
Okay, who are the main characters in this data drama?
Well, the star of the show is the data subject. That's you. Anyone whose personal data is being collected, stored, processed. Your specific rights, what you can ask for, depend on which of those complex regulations apply in your specific situation.
Okay, so I'm the data subject. What are some of the big rights I might have?
A really powerful one, highlighted in the source, especially under GDPR, Article 17, is the right to be forgotten.
The right to be forgotten. What's that?
It means you, the data subject, can request that a data controller will define them in a second, delete your personal data.
Wait, seriously, I can just tell a company, get rid of my data.
You can make the request, yes. And the data controller generally has to comply, unless there's a specific, legitimate legal reason they need to keep it, like an ongoing police investigation or some other legal obligation. But otherwise, yeah, it's a powerful right, giving you more control over your digital past.
That is powerful. Okay, you mentioned the data controller. Who are they? And you also mentioned a processor. What's the difference? Can we use your chef analogy again?
Sure. Think back to the kitchen. The data controller is like the head chef. They decide what meal to cook. That's the purpose of processing the data. They decide how it should be prepared, the means of processing. They're responsible for the big picture, writing privacy policies, getting your consent, being transparent about data use.
Okay, so the controller calls the shots on the data, and the kitchen staff following the recipe.
That's the data processor. They handle the data on behalf of the controller, strictly following their instructions. They don't decide the why or how. They just execute the plan.
Ah, like a cloud provider storing data for another company, or someone sending emails for them.
Exactly. Those are classic processor roles.
Yeah.
They still have compliance duties, of course, like keeping records for audits, but they act on the controller's orders.
Okay. Controller decides, processor does the work for them. Any other key roles?
Yes. The source also mentions data owners. These are usually people or teams inside the organization who are responsible for specific sets of data. Their job is to safeguard that data and enforce the company's internal rules about how it's used. Think governance and protection of that specific asset.
Okay, so let me see if I got this. I'm the data subject. The controller decides what happens with my data. The processor does the handling based on the controller's instructions, and the owner, inside a company, looks after protecting it.
That's a great summary of the main roles, yeah. Now, to manage all this data properly and meet all these compliance rules, companies absolutely have to know what data they actually possess. Which brings us to data inventory and retention.
Data inventory? Sounds like making a big list of all the data they have.
That's pretty much it. It's the systematic process of finding and cataloging all the data an organization holds, listing where it is, what kind of data it is, personal, financial, health, whatever, and how it's being used.
Why is that so vital for compliance? Can't they just, have a general idea?
Oh, definitely not. A general idea isn't good enough. The source is clear. Having a data inventory isn't just nice to have, it's a necessity for compliance frameworks. You simply can't protect data if you don't know you have it, or apply deletion rules if you don't know where it's hiding.
Ah, okay. Can't manage what you don't measure or even know exists.
Exactly. It's foundational for assessing risk, putting the right security controls in place, and crucially being able to prove compliance if an auditor comes knocking. How do you show you deleted someone's data if you didn't even know where it was stored?
Okay, total sense. You need the list to manage the stuff on the list. What about data retention then?
Data retention is about how long you keep data. And again, this isn't just up to the company. Often, the retention periods are dictated by regulations.
So they can't just delete stuff whenever or keep it forever?
Usually not. Regulations often say minimum times they must keep certain data, and sometimes maximum times after which they should delete it. And these rules vary wildly depending on the data type and the country or region.
How much variation?
Well, the source gives some really concrete examples. HIPAA in the U.S. says medical data needs to be kept for 6 years after the last entry or interaction. But in the U.K., financial data needs 6 years, while U.K. medical data needs 8 years.
Wow, 6 years U.S. medical, 8 years U.K. medical, 6 years U.K. financial. It really shows how specific these rules get. Depends on what it is and where you are.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
It highlights that managing data compliantly means knowing what you have, where it is, what you're allowed to do with it, and exactly how long you have to or are allowed to keep it. It's a complex balancing act defined by rules.
Well, wow. We have definitely covered a lot of ground here. We started with the basic why behind security compliance, looked at how companies report on it inside and out. We dug into the pretty serious consequences if they get it wrong, looked at how they try to monitor things continuously.
Right, the ongoing effort.
And then shifted to your rights as a data subject, different roles managing your data, and these crucial pieces of actually knowing what data they have the inventory and how long they keep it retention.
And understanding all this, it isn't just for the tech pros or lawyers. It really gives you essential context for, well, just living in the digital world today.
Yeah, interacting with all these services online.
It helps you understand what's behind those privacy policies in terms of service, maybe read them with a slightly sharper eye. Yeah. It gives you a clearer view of the rules governing how your personal information is supposed to be handled.
Absolutely. Makes you a much more informed digital citizen, really.
And so maybe just to wrap up, here's something to think about, a question to sort of chew on based on what we've discussed.
Okay.
Given this incredibly complex web of regulations, varying by location, by data type, and with all these different players, controllers, processors, handling bits of your information across maybe hundreds of different services, how can any individual realistically keep track of all their own data and actually exercise their rights, like that right to be forgotten, effectively and consistently across that entire sprawling digital landscape?
That's a really big question. It definitely makes you think about the scale of the challenge, doesn't it? For companies trying to comply and for us just trying to navigate it all.